What's up, what's up, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a new episode of the Meadows and Makers podcast. I'm your host, Greg Dowd, and I am all about trying to help you guys out with a little bit of white pill and bring you along the journey of where I am going for my own self-sufficiency. So that's what I like to talk about on this show. And tonight I've got a few things lined up for you. Going down the list here, I have a few of the items that I'd like to talk to you guys about tonight. I've got a project update for you on the Urbanite aquaponics system. I did go the route of putting in and installing in a UV filter, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the early results of that. I've got a couple pictures side by side. We can kind of see the before and after installing that UV filter. The plants that I put in the system are starting to sprout, which is really cool. And then we're going to move on to some other topics I've got for you tonight. A few videos that I'd like to share and some things to discuss with you guys, including one of the most recent things that I caught from the Grand Theft World podcast that I think is a pretty good synopsis of kind of where we're at currently, and that once you guys can be aware of how the agenda is being driven, that gives you a better way to articulate that to others, I believe, and then also a way that you can, figure out ways to get around the, what's confronting us in the future here. So what's up, Crimson Clad? Good to see you. Hope you're having a great week so far, and everybody else out there as well. I have a public service announcement from Billy Bond of Perma Pastures Farm that I wanted to start off with for tonight. And then I wanted to talk about a few different topics. There was a recent podcast that I watched where it was Jack Spirko talking about how we should be using AI as a tool and understanding how it works so that we don't get, manipulated by it, and we can use it to our advantage, because there are certain advantages that you can gain by, especially if you are a content creator, and some ways that it can be used for your benefit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight, because I think technology is a double-edged sword a lot of times. It can be used as a way to control us, and then it can also be used as a way to liberate us, because without the internet, I wouldn't be able to be talking to y'all and, be able to get more of a message out to people. So it's a great tool in that regard. And anybody can get their own little podcast spun up and talk about the topics that are important to them, and, get information out to others that you believe is important and beneficial. So it's a lot of times it's a double-edged sword. So another thing is that I wanted to cover tonight is kind of staying on the topic of technology, is drones for defense. And there's an interesting video out there of using a drone as a method for security on a piece of property. So I wanted to show you that video, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about some ideas on how we could use personal drones as defense, ways for having our own security and defense, especially if we're talking about remote properties and such. So I want to talk about that, and then I ran across an interesting video on a 3D printer that is creating shelters out of mud. I guess it's using like local materials and 3D printing shelters with it, and I found a neat video on that, so I want to show you guys that, and then wrap up everything with this video from the Grand Theft World podcast that I think is an important video to get out there, and important information to get out to folks. So, all right, guys. So let's get it started. Let's get it started up in here. Let me pull up the next screen here so that I can show you what I'm looking at and give you an idea of what has been going on recently with the Aquaponics project. So let's see here. So these two photos right here, here's like a before and after of the aquarium after I installed this UV filter. And so this, you can see in this photo right here that the water is like super cloudy and it's like super green. Doesn't look so, it looks pretty murky. I've got three bluegill sitting in the system. I guess they're also known as brim. So whatever your terminology is for those fish. But yeah, I was able to get them from I was able to fish for them and then got them, and then we've got them put in this aquaponics system because I want to show that yeah, you could take any kind of local fish from some kind of whatever area you're in, and if you're in North America, these brim you can find pretty much everywhere, and you can raise them in a system like this. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to demonstrate here with this system, and how it can be set up in somebody's like urban backyard, and it's pretty much hands off. I've only been checking on it like recently. I've been going in there like every couple of weeks to the every couple days of the week, so like maybe on a Monday and then coming back on a Friday to check on the system, and everything's been running really well so far. And so after I've made some improvements to the system, and we've got the UV filter in there, we've got the automated feeder going, the bell siphon is working great, there's a valve in the system on the pump to control the amount of flow of the water going into the filter buckets and everything. The filter buckets are nice and sealed. They're not leaking. No leaks anywhere in the system that I can see. And this thing's cranking away, and it's really kicking butt. So super thrilled about all that and how it's working. I've got a air stone in there so that you keep oxygen in the aquarium for the fish, and it is set up with a check valve in case there was something to happen with the air stone, that it would not siphon all the water out of the aquarium tank. And so there's a lot of safety measures in place if there was some kind of failure with the equipment, that we would not lose water in the aquarium tank that would kill the fish. So the fish, will have, there's plenty of redundancies in the system, so that there's not a way that the fish could be killed if there was some kind of failure of a pump or something like that. So all that set up, it's really working. It's working really well. We kind of somebody came up with a kind of a temporary solution for helping with the algae problem for me. And I guess somebody had a piece of vinyl material, like it was almost like a pool liner material that they draped over the aquaponics system. And it looked, just to help with the algae. So that's what this is right here. I'm not sure who put that on there. I'm sure if I look in the Discord chat, I can see somebody might have said who they were that did this. But yeah, I came over there the other day just to check on the system, see how everything was working. and I saw that somebody had put this over there. And so I wanted to look at the water clarity and kind of compare that to what it looked like a week ago around the same time. And so yeah, you're seeing like, a lot of the water is cloudy. This, I believe, was after I took a algae brush and kind of brushed down the sides of the aquarium. And so even after I did that, this was like right when I installed this UV filter, which is supposed to help kill the algae growth in the system. So I guess it kind of like inhibits new growth of algae when it gets passed through this pump in and gets exposed to this UV light. And so yeah, the water was just generally pretty cloudy. And then when I came back the other day, I did the same thing. I put that. This is a picture after I brushed the algae off the sides of the tank, but the tank water itself looks much clearer after I did all that. So it looks like I think that this UV filter is helping. It's probably also helping that somebody put this cover over it. But the water quality looks much better now. This is something that we were talking about. Normok brought up to me on the podcast is like, yeah, one really simple solution would just be to paint the aquarium black. I would I like that idea. It's a really cheap solution. The aquarium was painted, like one of the sides was painted at one point in time. But yeah, if you're gonna have an aquarium outside, I think you're always gonna be kind of fighting these issues with algae growth inside of the aquarium tank, especially if it's open and visible to the sunlight. So, either you can do that like through some different fish that you put in there that like to eat the algae, or you come up with something like this UV filter, or paint the entire tank black, or um, you know just some way to keep the sunlight from being exposed to the water inside of the aquarium to help with that. I like to be able to see the fish like easily, so one of the other solutions that I was talking with one of the guys at the Makerspace about was to create something that I could just like slide in there. That would be this like kind of political sign material, which would be a little bit insulative and have some insulation properties, and then also help keep the sunlight outside from going into the aquarium and causing more growth of algae. Um, so far, so good, I'd say, with this UV filter. And the particular filter that I got is I think it's called the green killing machine, or like green algae killing machine or something like that. So let me see if I can pull this up real quick for you. Algae killing machine, UV filter, aquarium. Let's see if I could show you what I purchased here. So this is it right here, actually. Green killing machine, and I was able to order it from Petco, and they had a local store in Huntsville, so I was able to go and order it online and just pick it up at the store. And then I guess they had a deal where it's like you save like 10%. So I was able to get a little bit off, but it was a little pricey. So it was about 70. I think it was about 70 after I paid for the tax and the whatever I had, the 10% off, I guess, kind of helped with some of the tax a little bit. So it was like 70 something dollars. And this one treats up to 50 gallons. So I have a 55 gallon tank, but it's not completely full. Um, so that was one of the solutions, and that's what I've implemented so far. So let's see. Theta TV. We got somebody watching on Theta TV. So what's up? I can't see quite 89 pintail, I think. So what you're saying? Yeah, sunlight feeds that algae growth. 89 pintail. Sunlight feeds that algae growth, so it makes sense to have the tarp. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, the only issue with the tarp thing is that it kind of looks ugly. So so yeah, I'd like to come up with a more elegant solution for that. And I think the like political sign thing would be cool, and maybe creating a graphic for uh, creating some kind of graphic for it or something like that I can like maybe laser etch onto them or something, or uh, some kind of sheet or something that I can put over it so that it just like maybe says like the Urbanite on it or something like that. If you guys have any ideas, let me know, because the whole idea of this thing is to just be a public demonstration of this prototype design that Robbie created here, and to help point people towards his DIY plans. And then we're even talking at the makerspace that maybe we could work with Robbie on creating some kind of um, kit for this, because it's his DIY plans are great. And this thing, if it works really well, it would be really cool to have some kind of kit that people could build, um, and where everything's already pretty much ready to go for you. Like all the hardware is included, and you have the step-by-step guide that will help you assemble it, and even going out and helping people assemble something like this would be cool, because you could have this in a little greenhouse, like in somebody's suburban backyard. And that, I would say, like, that would be the way to go for something like this. Or um like like if you couldn't install a pond on your property, something like that, like, I mean, you could do something similar to this and kind of divert the water into different grow beds and things like that. But like if you have very limited space, like, this is the idea for this system, is like, I can find some kind of area that I can put this in, that I'll be able to grow food, and have the fish, and then the byproduct of the fish waste can be a useful fertilizer for other soil gardening efforts. So that's the goal. That's kind of the hope for this system, and to be able to promote it there, and teach people about aquaponics and how it's helps conserve water. And we're basically recycling the water over and over again, and you're able to have the benefit of the plants growing with the fish. And then if you have chickens and stuff like that, like, if you don't want to eat the fish yourself, you can always feed them to your chickens, things like that. One other thing that I want to explore with this system, and I just talked to a buddy about it today, was to create a black soldier fly larvae harvesting system, which is just like a tote, one of those plastic totes. And I think you can fill it with like coffee grounds, and you keep it at an angle, and then you just have like a piece of PVC that has an elbow on it, and then you can divert that into a 5-gallon bucket. And I think naturally that like these black soldier fly will lay their larvae in this thing, and I think you have to like, I think you have to suspend some like piece of corrugated cardboard at the top, and then they'll like lay their eggs in that, and then the larvae they will drop down into the coffee grounds and like eat a little bit of that stuff, and then like once they've got their fill, they'll like climb, and then they'll basically self harvest. So that's what I'd like to do because the main pinch point for this system from not being completely like self-contained, its own self-contained system is like you need some kind of input as far as feed goes. So you're gonna have to rely on a store or something like that to get your fish feed. Well, what if we could eliminate that by harvesting our own black soldier fly larvae as a protein source for the fish? So that's the idea. That's the idea behind that, is to be able to make this like, you know, we're making the black soldier fly larva. Everything's like pretty much there. We can use like old coffee grounds. We could go to like some coffee shops in town to see if we can get some coffee grounds, some spent coffee grounds from them, or we can just use like the spent coffee grounds that we generate ourselves. And I think food waste, like just general food waste, should work. But I want to explore that for this system as well, so it's more of a like fully contained, self-sufficient type system. And more stuff's planned for the whole space as well. So they want to install these wicking beds. So I'll be helping with that project, and then also to get this system on some kind of solar power. So, uh, so that's another thing. Let's see, 89 pintail. That's a cool suggestion. Electric bug zapper would feed the fish. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Yeah, there's all kinds of bugs that are flying around, and it'd probably help with the insects that aren't so beneficial as well. I did plant flowers in with this system. I planted some lavender because I have from past experience with the aquaponics systems is that you will get some insects that'll come out or can hatch out into the system. Like army worm is one that I dealt with in the past. That you can use this like natural bacteria that'll kill them in the aquaponics system, but like anything you add into the aquaponics system, you have to be very careful of, because you really don't want to mess with any of the balance of the bacteria and everything in the system. So you don't want to use any kind of chemicals or anything like that. So you have to use something natural. So I've had to deal with that before, and one thing that I learned is that if you buy those little soil pods for starting seeds in, a lot of times those soil pods can have the eggs of those army worms in them. Is something that we theorize that could have been a possibility that happened, and why I had such an issue with those army worms. So you want to avoid like putting any kind of things in the system. And in aquaponics, you really don't need any kind of like a media for starting the seeds in, like a growing media for starting the seeds in. And Robbie taught me that by he would basically just take his seeds and he just spread them in the gravel, and like maybe move your hand over the gravel a little bit to get them to fall down where the water line is when the bell siphon triggers. So in this grow bed, the water level rises to a certain point, which is like about an inch to a half inch below the rock surface. And you want to do that because you want to prevent algae growth on the top of the rock surface, because that will inhibit any kind of growth of the roots of the plants and the nutrients. It'll starve out their ability to the other plants that you want in there to be able to grab those nutrients. So yeah, you only want the water level to you want it to stay below the surface of the rocks. So that's what it's doing. It's filling to a certain point, and then it's draining, and then it's just continuously doing that, filling and draining, to have enough oxygen for the plants, because you can't just drown the plants all the time. So it's giving them oxygen, and then it's um, those rocks act as a media for the roots of the plants, so that they can have something stable to spread their roots out into. Um, so it ends up working really well if you just put the grow media in there. The rocks that I use are this river stone, like you can use like this river stone that you can buy locally at any kind of hardware store. You just want to avoid like anything that may interact chemically with the water. So like pea gravel works really well because it doesn't interact chemically. This river stone works really well. There's these clay pebbles that you can use that work really well. A lot of people that do aquaponics use those. And then what else? Those are the three that I know off the top of my head. Lava rock would work fine too, depending on where you are and what your access to that materials. Like, use whatever material is cheapest in your area, basically, is what I would say, and that you can get your hands on. That won't interact with the water and mess up the pH with the water. So that's what I got to say about that. So let me queue up a couple of videos here for you guys while I am transitioning the screens here, so I can work in the background. And I've got a few of these pulled up for you guys, but I don't have them specifically in the window I need them to be in. So let me go ahead and search for these real quick. YouTube. And the first video I want you guys to check out is this PSA from Billy Bond at Perma Pastures Farm about weird people coming up to your farm, basically. He has been noticing some of this stuff kind of happening on his property, and I wanted to share this a little while back, but I wasn't able to get it out to you guys at the time because I forgot about it. So let me see if I can figure out what's going on. And see if I can find the video that I'm looking for here. So let me see. If I can't find it, then we will move on to something else. Okay, here we go. All right, let me pull this up.
Hey, Billy.
All right, so this is called PSA. They're coming to real properties, and this is not something that would have been in my mind, like especially. Yeah. How stunning and brave of me to transition the screens. I'm coming out as trans, guys. I'm transgunite, I guess. Like I identify as a 9mm. All right. So here we go. I want to play this PSA with Billy Bond here for you. Let me see if I can pull this up.
Go ahead and From Permapasture's farm. I would ordinarily do a video like this on the front porch, but the wind is blowing like nobody's business, so I'm having to do it in the podcast studio, which only seems fitting because this is almost certainly going to be the topic for tonight. When I was little, my dad would often take us fishing because it was something we could do, at least a form of entertainment that didn't require money. So when I was younger, my youngest brother, and my oldest brother, and my dad and I all went to Lake Hefner in Oklahoma. We were going to go fishing. It was kind of a cool day, and there really weren't many people out there. So we were in this area, I think on the south side of the lake, where it was something of a peninsula. A little bit of trees out there, so it was difficult to see everything. So my youngest brother and I were fishing on one side, and my oldest brother and my dad were fishing on the other side. There was a pretty good gap between us. And while we were out there fishing, of course, being like every other kid growing up in the 80s, we were told not to talk to strangers. But while we were fishing, a white van pulled up, muddy, all the way up to the windows. And out of that van came a black guy and a white guy, very tall. And my brother and I were over fishing. They came over trying to talk to us. It was a little bit of small talk. It was right off the bat, it seemed uneasy. And of course, we were taught not to talk to anybody. So they would ask questions like, how's the fishing going? And things like that. Things that seemed like, everyday conversation. And they kept getting closer and closer and closer to the point where it was obvious there was no way I was going to leave my little brother there. And it was obvious that these guys were up to no good. And at that moment, when it seemed like they were about to make a move, because we were up against the water and the only place for us to go was in the water. That's how close they were getting. One of them heard or saw something, I don't know what it was, and then they immediately jumped in that van, spun out of there, and got out of Dodge. It was about that time I saw my dad and my oldest brother running as fast as they possibly could over to where we were. Those guys were clearly up to no good. Okay? This is all going to make sense, hopefully, in a minute. It wasn't a couple of years later that my brother and I, same younger brother, my dad had sent us up to the corner grocery to go get bread and milk or whatever it was. Same kind of thing happened. Guy pulls up in a car this time, threatened us to get in the car. Of course, that didn't work out well either. We ran away. And I said all that to say this, that here as of late, there's been a whole lot of Amber Alerts going on. I mean, far more than anything I've ever remember seeing in recent time. At the farm where you live gathering, there was a guy there that I know, and he lives locally. And he told me this story about how these guys that appeared to be of, I don't know, Eastern European descent, something like that. And they came up to his farm, to his place of business, which isn't like right there. It's off a little bit off the beaten path. You don't just show up there. And these two guys of Middle Eastern descent get out, apparently well dressed. And they're going up to their kids asking if they can buy chickens, if they can buy eggs. Just bizarre nonsense, just out of nowhere. Later on, he come to find out, he told me that later on, I found all this out right there at the farm where you live gathering, that apparently this had been happening to a number of people throughout the neighborhood. Now, up until that time, I'd heard something like that, and I just dismissed it at the time of being maybe this was some urban legend going around, until he told me that this happened to him, to his kids. And this isn't a guy that's easily given to exaggeration or hyperbole. So I believe him. This last weekend, turns out, completely different place, separated by maybe 100 miles, and hearing the same story unfold like that all over again. Same sort of thing, same sort of script, same sort of thing unfolding. A week ago, we have this creepy van parked out in front of my place. And believe me, y'all, this is not a soft target, if you know what I'm saying. Stands there. Creepiest thing, Michelle was there with me. Creepiest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I don't live in a place that you just happen upon. Okay? out there with this creepy van, every window, including the front window, like darkened, tinted, some kind of way. Very creepy, and both of us got the unction that maybe these people were up to no good either. Look, I guess it used to be the thing where you've heard about the Epstein thing and how they would groom these people to abuse them ultimately. Or all these kids that just come up missing and they're never heard of again. There are diabolical people in this world, and I know that everybody, not everybody, but a certain fair number of people, when they hear me talk about these things, they automatically chalk it up to conspiracy theory. Let me challenge you and say, can you say the word just conspiracy without then adding theory to it? Maybe it is a conspiracy. Maybe it's just a bunch of wackos out there, but at the end of the day, what is all this worth if you lose even a single member of your family? Especially to something as diabolical as what these people are doing, which I can't even state in this forum, which we'll talk a little bit about it in the podcast tonight. But I can't even go and tell you the full extent of what is happening with these people. Now, if I were to get on this microphone and tell you that I'm coming out as a trans-testicle polar bear, well, that's completely okay. But it's not okay for me to talk about the unthinkable things that are happening to these kids. Folks, I'm not saying this. I know that there's a certain number of channels right now that are engaged full-time, it seems, in hyperbole and, high drama, all those things. We're a how-to channel. That's what we do. So when you see me sitting here right now talking about this thing, it is because I see this as my duty, as a public service announcement, to make everybody else, not to create fear, but to keep you aware. Remember, the tagline of our podcast is stay alert, stay alive. Well, that also applies to your kids. And even in some of the friendly places where you're thinking there may be a little bit of time to put down your guard, you just simply can't do it. When that sort of thing almost happened to myself and my brother, that was back in the early 80s. Can you imagine? I mean, it's so brazen now that they are going to rural properties seeking to do who knows what. So folks, I'm not saying this in any way, shape, or form to create drama or anything like that. We just don't do that. It is to make you, at this time, in the United States of amnesia, to realize what is going on and how ubiquitous it's starting to become, how brazen it's becoming. All right, y'all. Hopefully this was a blessing to you. I just wanted to get on here quickly and deliver what it is I had to say. Till next time, y'all, stay alert, stay alive.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've been talking about with with one of my buddies is thinking about creating the Alabama Pedophile Hunter Club, and we run a pig business, so raising pigs, and then we also do wood chipper rentals. So, and then just have the photo out there and see how far that goes on social media. We'll see what kind of stir we can create with that kind of thing, saying that we don't deal with any of that shit around here. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys, something to always be alert and aware of your surroundings. And then, if you have children, like, make sure that you're watching over them, and you don't let your eye get too far off from where your kids are, because this shit is very pervasive, and it's like he's saying, it's like he saw this dude coming around his place, and he's kind of scratching his head why somebody would be coming off the beaten path to his property. So you never know, and never think that you're safe. Just my personal story is that I was working for an auto parts store in college, and I was robbed at gunpoint while I was working there at the store. And you have in your mind, I guess, like, once you become so comfortable at a certain point, um, like depending on how you're raised or whatever, if you weren't raised in a rough area or you didn't see a lot of violence or anything like that, like the thought of that happening is like not really present in your mind, but it's something that could happen to anybody and could happen at any point in time. So, you know, take defense classes, you know, have some kind of way that you could defend yourself. The best way is to get out of the situation, to run away and, you know, try to get distance between you and the person that's trying to do violence against you. But if you can't do that, like you get backed into a corner, you know, have some kind of protection on you, whether that be, you know, being able to carry a sidearm or and if you are going to carry your sidearm, you should have proper training and you should train with it often, especially drawing from a concealed carry situation. You should practice that and practice it quite a bit, because if you get into a situation like that, you are going to fight, flight, or freeze. So you're gonna run away, you're gonna do something to act, or you're gonna just freeze. And if you don't have the proper muscle memory for that kind of thing, and you don't, you know, have to, if you're not able to just act without having to think a whole lot, then I mean, you want to, you know, definitely. If somebody's attacking you, it's pretty obvious, right? that you want to get them away. But you want to have those skills. So, but if you're not cool with that, at least carry like some pepper spray or something like that, or have an attack dog, or something. I don't know, like have a defense dog or something like that. I don't know. I know that there are guys that they do train dogs so that they can be like defense dogs and stuff like that. So things to think about. You know, never think that you're totally safe. Even if you're in a good play, even if you're in a safe spot, you think it's safe. You know, check your six is what they say, is like make sure that you're aware of it, everything that's in your near surroundings. Is kind of a good thing to keep in mind. So just wanted to throw that out there as kind of I like that as his PSA, just to make sure that you stay checking your six, so they say. So this is the other video that I wanted to introduce you guys to. And I'm gonna play a small portion of this, but yeah, this is Jack Spirko's podcast, and he's talking about you know, let's look at some of this AI and let's understand it a bit better and use it kind of as a tool to understand how you can create and, you know, use it for your advantage. And he kind of made some, you know, kind of some references to some of the folks in the past, like when email first came out or whatever. It was like nobody, like the older folks didn't really want to use email or whatever, but it was like, you know, it's way easier than, you know, having to send people letters over the mail, and, you know, you just made communication easier.
And we are live.
Wow, sorry about that. So anyway, he was just talking about some of these tools, and kind of posing that question, like, you know, how can we use AI and start playing with it, and maybe make it a goal to see how it can be helpful in your life and your content creation, whatever you got going on. Like maybe there is a good use for this AI stuff. Like I can already think about, like, it would be really helpful if I could plug into one of these AIs to help me generate like a title and a thumbnail for videos. Maybe not so much the title, but like maybe a thumbnail to help crank out stuff like that. So, I can't remember exactly where he was, but let me see. I think this is an example of a something, one of the AI programs that can generate images, and I think he asked it to generate a image of a redneck hippie duck farmer as a thumbnail for his podcast this episode. So let's start from here and just listen to what he's got to say a little bit about this.
But if you can mass do it with fake intelligence that can learn patterns and know what it's trying to create, like when I said to, I used Midjourney on Discord to create the thumbnail for today's episode. I said, I want an image of a redneck duck farmer. And I played around with it. And you can see some limitations of AI. If you look at if you're watching the video, if you look at the duck in the front and the one to over his right side, that's a pretty odd looking face on that duck. I don't know what the hell kind of build that's supposed to be. It looks like it's messed up. Like it ain't perfect. That's fine. I left it not perfect. I didn't try to fix it because I want to be able to make that point. That's a pretty cool image. If you look at that image, you might think, you know what that image looks like? That image looks like an old school photograph, like something from the 70s. Well, I actually told it that I wanted it to look like a 70s photograph, and it was able to give me what I asked for. So that's what your masters are going to do with it. And so now we've come far enough on the circle that I can explain what you should. You don't need to be afraid of the Terminators or the Matrix machines or any of that shit anytime soon. You really don't. Matthew says he thought that image was a photo. Go look at it again and look at those ducks in the front.
So have any of you guys use this program, Midjourney? I know there's like the DALL-E, and then of course there's the OpenAI ChatGPT. I guess 4. That I'm not sure what the status is on that one right now, but have any of you guys used any of this stuff so far? See, Rondon, you're saying AI has been pretty useless for me. I think I'm doing it wrong. Yeah. So, like he goes on in the podcast to say like my videos being out there, you know, on YouTube, putting videos out there where, you know, it's got the full part of my face and everything is out. Like if somebody wanted to like do some kind of extortion thing on a member of my family or some friends that I know, you know, they could pull my voice patterns and my face, and, you know, use it to do a AI generated like voice and picture, like on some kind of like a Zoom call or something like that would pop up, and, you know, they would say that like I need some help. I'm stuck somewhere or something like that. And one idea that he had was like, you know, in order to not get manipulated by something like that, is to have some kind of code word that you share with you know, your friends and your family that are close to you, that you know, you would say, so hey, give me the code word. All right, if you're really in a situation or if you're really in a spot. Or just come up with, be like, I'll never ask, you know, just tell people, you know, I'll never ask you guys for money or something like that. But, you know, and if somebody is going around asking for money, then they're not me. So, but, you know, anyway, like you could imagine a scenario where somebody, you know, might be able to manipulate you through using some kind of artificial intelligence representation of someone. And, you know, it might get to a point where it's that good where, you know, it would be pretty difficult to distinguish between, the AI and the real person. So I thought that was pretty interesting. If you want to listen to more of his talk on that podcast, he brought up some interesting points, but that's kind of the highlight of it that I wanted to share with you. So this Mid Journey, I guess, is some kind of application that you can use in Discord or something like that. So I'm not familiar with that, but I'd like to maybe start using some of that to make the titles for the podcast, or at least something that helped me out with generating the title images for the podcast. So let's see. I'm gonna look that up right now. Midjourney AI, and I guess this one is a little bit better as far as like it's not like as I guess it doesn't have like the woke stuff as much in there, so like it'll kind of do more of the things that you want it to do on your prompts, instead of saying like, oh, I can't do this because it's outside of my, it might hurt somebody's feelings or something. I don't know. So this is Midjourney AI is a intelligence program and service created and hosted by a San Francisco based independent research lab. It generates images from natural language description similar to OpenAI's DALL-E and Stable Diffusion. Midjourney's images look for similar quality to those outputted by Latitude's Voyage, but Latitude charges $15 for 20 image credits as part of its paid plan. The Midjourney bot runs on their server and creates 4 diffused images as a small preview from which users can choose the ones that they want to create, and then it produces a higher res version. All right. So, anyway, it's just another one of these AI tools, I guess you could say, that can help generate images for you. So, just want to throw that out there. The next thing I wanted to cover with you guys tonight is defense drones. Good idea or nah? You think we might, be kind of on the cusp of something like this? And I've thought about this for a while. Like, I kind of think like it might get to a point where it's like my drones are fighting your drones, and then like there's killer swarm drone bot battles going on all over the place. But these guys just recently did a video where they were having some intruders on their property. This is Hacksmith Industries on YouTube, and they solved the problem by creating a drone that would kind of scare away the intruders.
These guys are going to break into our shipping container.
And so they came up with a pretty neat solution, and I wanted to play some of this video to show you what they came up with, which is kind of a pretty neat little system where they can deploy a drone when there's an image of somebody coming onto their property through their security cameras, and then it'll deploy autonomously. And let me see if I can fast forward to their first full test of this thing and show you kind of what these guys came up with, which is I think is pretty cool. Definitely like the building the frames for these drones is like not that big of a deal now, and getting these motors and then like the equipment to help stabilize the drone and everything. I think you can make like a decent DIY drone fairly affordably now. So that's kind of what these guys did here, and then they kind of came up with a custom algorithm so that it could fly, and then it could, you know, do some other kind of security stuff where it would kind of annoy the people that were on their property and scare them off, basically. So here is that video, and then I've fast forwarded, or I've pulled into like 12 minutes into the video here. So I just wanted to show you guys, like, okay, here's an application of somebody doing this already, which is kind of interesting. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it for you.
It's pretty much going to detect me on the security system. Go.
It's just going to fly the pre-programmed route, and then it'll go and land back at its home.
Let's do this thing. Okay, walking around. Here we go.
Is it taking off?
Yep, it's taking off.
Some drone found you. I have done absolutely nothing here. I got you loud and clear on the camera. I'm recording what this drone is seeing, so I can use that. I'm just getting ready to set her down.
It's right above the portable right now.
Should be coming down.
I don't know about that. One sec. Well, I got that on camera.
Yay! Why did it go back up?
Oh, she's done, Ben.
With one drone down, we need to keep pressing on. The charging pad has been on the roof for a couple of days in the rain and snow, so we have to check to make sure it still works. This also gave us the opportunity to test landing on the roof.
It didn't know where the pad was, so that's not that surprising.
So this was a neat little solution they came up with. Was you know, they need a way to recharge the batteries, and then there's the wireless charging that you can do, but it's like very inefficient, and you're not able to transfer a whole lot of power very quickly using that method. So they came up with this pad method where if the drone can make contact with the conductive pad that they built, then it would be able to like more quickly charge the drone. But these guys are up in Canada, so they had to figure out a way to keep that little pad heated as well, so that it, you know, wouldn't interfere with the contact that the drone makes with things. So they came up with some an interesting way to do that, but they did have a lot of difficulty getting it to land back on the charging pad. But you know, some folks are already playing with this kind of idea, and I think it is a pretty neat idea to have something as kind of a, you know, a defensive drone, so to say, on your property that could be deployed and capture video and you know, capture and record video and make some sounds, alert other people that are around, you know, and do some stuff to mess with the people that are trying to take your stuff. So let's continue to check out what these guys did here.
Thinks it's at home. It is pretty happy with its home position. I don't know if I am, but it is. Fly her out to the middle of there. It should reestablish position before it hits the ground. This arm! No! This is what I mean, where I wanted it to be somewhere where if it missed, it would just miss.
You know,
Not if it missed, it would fall off.
hey, you left me and Logan unsupervised. You say, hey, go put the charging pad on the roof, bud. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem, hey, I'll get up there. And I go, hey, look at that spot. It'd be a really great spot to put a charging pad. Comes in, he's like, oh, that's the worst spot you could have put it. Hey, let's go.
I have some good news.
Uh-huh.
It's charging.
Hey!
Drones are going up tonight. We're putting them on the roof. We're starting with one. We're starting with the gadgets that we know work. We're going to take some baby steps. We had some failures with the test yesterday. Finishing up the code, I'm getting it integrated with our company's Slack channel. So it'll tell us when stuff gets detected or not. We can tell it to arm, we can tell it to launch. It's Friday, 4:43 p.m. We're going to a company party tonight. We're gonna leave the drone up here over the weekend. If we get footage, we get footage. If nobody shows up, well then, nobody shows up.
We had an eventful weekend.
We're sitting at dinner, all of us, company party.
It's going great.
It was awesome. And all of a sudden, a few of us get the message that the security system found somebody on the lot. And I was kind of in shock. And then I saw the message drone in air. So talked to James, talked to Ian, they pulled up the security cameras for the building. I pulled up my phone connected to my laptop and saw that in fact, yes, the drone was in the air. And it was flying over to supposedly where a person was.
Where is he on this one?
So they heard the drone, because the drone is not quiet, and they ran. And they went and hid behind our tent. And the drone just continued to search.
I feel like a proud parent, you know? It's like seeing my kids swim for the first time.
It's really bad video, but
It's okay.
The drone went to go land and it missed the landing pad. That's not all that surprising.
no, totally missed it.
What?
On the roof. It didn't break.
All right, so we're trying to land on the pad again. It's controlling, and it's going to try and land again. And if we can get to land on the charging pad, then that means we're good for another burglar.
I hate how out of control. I know. I know.
Battery low?
Yeah, battery low.
Uh-oh. Return to home?
You just earned it.
Oh, boy.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Where's the video feed? Oh, oh no.
Link timeout now.
Oh, no.
Seconds. Yeah, she's done. Link timeout, no heartbeat. Yeah.
Where is it? Where is it? No! Hey, it landed next to the slack line.
It worked until it did. Looking a little sad. We need to get this thing fixed so we can get this thing back in the air.
Yeah.
ASAP. We've got the drones and the charging pad working just in time for this brave soul to wander onto the property. Since these two incidences, we haven't had anyone else really show up on the property, which kind of sucks because, well, it doesn't suck. It's great for us because we don't have people trying to rob us, but it's bad for the video. It's bad for you guys because we can't show the potential of this drone if nobody's here. Ben and I have called up a friend, Tony, who thinks he's gonna come here for a tour. Hopefully, this is a opportunity for us to really flex the potential of these drones. He does know what we do, so he probably is on it. He's like, am I going to die tonight?
Okay.
Yep, do it.
On.
I think we hit him. Oh! No, Tony! You're all right, Tony?
What the hell? What was that? I'm here for.
So yeah, they got it to like throw down some paint on them. So I think that that's kind of a neat idea because like you'd be able to identify somebody or whatever being at the trying to rob you or whatever. They get covered in some kind of paint that's hard to get off. So so yeah, it's pretty cool little thing. Like maybe even thinking about more of a tactical use for something like that would be this. You can fill these balloons up with like old motor oil and like sand and like black paint and things like that, like oil-based black paint and things like that, and you could use it to, deploy in certain situations as like a tactical thing to kind of confuse the folks that are being aggressive towards you. So, like I said, at the beginning of the episode, it's just like all this technology is a double-edged sword. It's like it can be used as a benefit and advantage. If we utilize it and understand it, but that takes the effort to start to play around with some of this stuff and you know, just start to tinker with some things. It's like that's why I called my channel the TinkerTribe. It's just, you know, experiment and tinker with different things and see how they could be beneficial for use in your life. So that's something interesting. And I think that maybe there's an industry there for folks to consider developing self-defensive drones. So for the case of intruders and things like that. Something that might be an interesting possibility out there, or maybe a good opportunity. All right, so I have another interesting video about some technology to show you guys. It's about using 3D printers to create shelters, and using large 3D printers to create buildings. And
last year,
this is a video that came across the feed on freedomsphoenix.com, and so I thought it would be a cool one to share with you guys. You know, about the possibilities of creating low cost type of houses with some of this technology. You know, I've seen a lot of information about different companies doing this. Like, it's almost like, okay, well, if it works so well, then like, why aren't, you know, we doing this on like a pretty massive scale now? Which makes me believe that a lot of this stuff isn't quite economically that feasible yet. For, you know, the investment in the equipment, and then, okay, the materials you used only cost $900, but like you had to spend, you know, $500,000 on the equipment to do it. So it's like, you know, how many of these low cost houses do you have to build until you can pay it off, right? So yeah, anyway, it's just kind of an interesting thing. You know, it's like people are proving that, okay, we can do this, but how can it become like a viable thing? For me, I wouldn't, you know, hold my breath on any of this stuff. Like coming to a place near you, it's like, okay, if you're going to develop something, that might be a way to do it. But you know, I would say the best way is to use whatever local materials you have that you could use to build your structures in the most economical way possible. And there's guys doing that that have some really neat channels as well that are doing some cool stuff like that. I've highlighted a couple of them on the podcast. Jamie Mansell is one, and then there's a guy that's using this styro aircrete that's local here in Alabama, and I believe I featured a video of his probably a couple podcasts ago. I think it's like Creative Building Designs, I think was his channel. But yeah, let me play this video for you guys real quick. Let me see if I've got it all pulled up here. Yep. So yeah, check this out.
the company Icon announced a project to build a new district in Texas consisting of 100 homes printed using a 3D printer. It's expected that the cost of such housing will be around $450,000, the lion's share of which is the cost of building materials. But what if we told you that it's possible to literally print a house from clay that is everywhere and is free? At the same time, the cost of such construction will not exceed the price of an average iPhone. Intrigued? 4 years ago, the company WASP and the architectural firm Mario Cucinella Architects presented their design concept for the world's first clay house created using 3D printing. And now the project, known as Tekla, has finally been implemented in Italy, near the city of Ravenna. The house consists of 2 interconnected dome-shaped elements with a ribbed outer wall made up of 350 layers of clay stacked on top of each other. This method of laying building material not only provides the structure with the necessary strength, it also helps to create a thermal barrier between the indoor spaces and the street. But the most interesting thing is that the main material for creating the house was a mixture of local clay, water, rice husk fibers, and a binding agent that makes up only 5% of the total raw material mass. According to the company's plan, similar structures can easily be created in any other part of the planet using materials common to a particular region. The 646 square foot and 14-foot high building consists of a living room, kitchen, and sleeping area. The house is also equipped with utility rooms and a circular skylight on the roof. The building's interior has a similar organic aesthetic and furniture, some of which is already partially printed using a 3D printer. It took only 200 hours to build the house since the construction did not require an additional frame. Another 2 weeks were needed for the clay to dry. The cost of such a complex is about $900, which is not higher than the cost of an average iPhone. Thanks to this, even low-income groups for whom housing is a particularly acute issue will be able to afford clay houses. But the most interesting thing is that you can print such a house yourself. Recently, the same Italian company Wasp announced the Maker Economy Starter Kit. This will be a container with everything you need for printing, including a 3D printer, photo-curable resins, welding kit, biogas generator, and even clay. According to forecasts, by 2030, 4 billion people with an annual income of less than $3,000 will demand a sharp increase in the supply of affordable housing. Most of them will not be able to spend more than 10% of their revenue on their own home. That is why clay constructions with an average cost of less than $1,000 will increase significantly in demand in the global real estate market. Do you think that clay houses will become as popular as developers predict? Or is the future still with concrete boxes? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There are still a lot of interesting things ahead from the world of science and technology.
Oh, what do you guys think? Do you want to live in a 3D printed clay house? Probably if I could build it for $900, that would be pretty sweet to build some of those things. Like, just buy your raw land, and I guess you could plop out your 3D printer kit or whatever, and just start, you're like gathering all the local clay and figuring out what kind of materials you can add in this thing and get started printing. It'd definitely be pretty cool. So let's see. I guess they don't even have the link to it. So this is just, I guess, highlighting the company that's creating this. So it's like, what were they talking about? It was some kind of Wasp company or something like that. Wasp Maker Economy Starter Kit. Let's see if we can find this real quick. What's the old MSRP on one of these bad boys? Yeah. I've been listening to this one guy. He's got all these Southernism sayings, which is something that I probably want to start trying to figure out some of these Southernisms, because they're just one-liners that are just hilarious. Let's see, 3dwasp.com is what pops up first off the board here. All right, do I have to do that? All right, whatever. Projects, 3D printed houses, 3D printers, clay. Where's their clay kit? Supposedly they have a kit. Oh, buddy. Clay extruder, wasp extruder, all this kind of stuff. Is this like a small? I guess this is like the small version. Professional clay kit, something for fluid dense and ceramic materials. So, yeah, this is like a small scale kit here. And I guess that's all in euros. So, however much this is in euros for the small version of it. All right. So, I wanted to show you guys that, and then what's up, Normok? How you doing there, fellow rabbi? Shalom. We're just talking about 3D printing clay houses, and there's this company out there. I guess that's they're trying to make it so that you can. It looks like they have a bunch of small scale kits for, like printing with clay, and I guess they built one of their first prototypes of a building in Italy, I guess is what it was saying in this video. That's all printed out of like local clay, and I guess they use rice husks and some kind of other binder material, but they didn't specify what that was. But anyway, they said the total cost for this little dome-shaped building that they built was like $900 or something like that. So, good idea, or what are you guys' thoughts on that? think it's kind of neat. How neat is that? I think that's pretty neat. All right. So, I wanted to shift to the final video that I wanted to share with you guys for tonight. That I wanted to queue up for you. This is the latest Grand Theft World podcast, and it is titled Secular Anti-Humanists. And this episode goes into more kind of tumbling down to the old rabbit hole on, how all these guys are kind of interconnected. Like they were talking about how Soros, some of his money comes from one of the Rothschilds, I guess, gave him quite a large investment for some of his stuff. And then, kind of getting into the whole plan going forward is like basically the Chinese model of market socialism, where there is a, kind of a free market, but the government pretty much owns all the companies and everything like that. But there's the ability to create products and things like that, and then using the whole social credit system and stuff that they have over there is kind of the big model that is getting laid out in front of us. And so they're getting into like how what led up to that. And there were two really, really great interviews in this podcast. And, Grand Theft World podcast is like over a 7 hour long podcast. If you want to dive into it, I think there's really good information in these. Pretty much every episode is chock full of a ton of really great information. And they cover a lot of the stories that are happening from the week. And trying to give you like a good background on, what led up to this point in time, and to capture this in in video format so that it can be displayed to the future as kind of a time capsule. And so he brought on this Michael Rechtenwald gentleman, and they had a really good discussion on this stuff that's on some of the things that have happened in history, and kind of how all it links into where we're at today and where we're going to in the future for what the controllers of this system have planned for the future. So I thought it would be a good thing to share with you guys, because if we are aware of the things that are coming coming our direction, then, we're better prepared for how we can be more proactive in how to find solutions and find ways around it. One of the big things that they brought up in this chat here was the oncoming talk about digital ID, and that being tied to basically everything about you, creating like a second avatar for you, where if you want to be able to use the central bank digital currencies, which is kind of the rollout of the next thing for control, for your use of these central bank digital currencies, you're going to have this digital ID, which ties you to everything, like your health information and everything about you. And so, knowing that, you want to build some kind of way that you don't have to use these central bank digital currencies, like, and figure out your network of people that you can deal with, and figure out, what kind of currencies you'd want to use, that would, so that you don't have to use the CBDCs. Figure out if you and your folks will trade with crypto, if you'll do barter deals, or you trade labor, you'll trade things that you're producing. Certain things you might have to interact with it. That whole part of the economy for like certain things. So it's just going to have to become like getting creative so that you don't get sucked into this, what they were discussing as this land of the dead, basically, is like people that aren't physically connected into our reality, and kind of being pushed into this system of the elite's idea for the reality that they want to create, and kind of creating a simulated reality that you should live in. And so anyway, let me play this section of the video here for you guys. It'll probably play me out to the end of the podcast, but yeah, if they don't take this one down, I'm streaming it on YouTube. Hopefully this won't get me taken down off of there, but yeah, this information is really great, and it needs to get out there, I believe, and so that more people can figure out what the hell is actually going on. So I'm gonna play this for you guys, and then I'll wrap it up at the end here, and we'll see you guys for another episode next week. But yeah, let let me get this kicked off, and then I'll wrap it up at the end and close it out. So here we go.
You weren't just, persecuted and not prosecuted, but, kind of persona non grata. They put you off into the little gulag area to discourage you from, speaking your mind. And then it just escalated from there. And now you're free. And I want to hear about this transformational process, because I think that's the inspiring part.
Well, that's a great question. So, yeah, you were right. I was, canceled by the woke mob, or not really canceled. I was persecuted by them. And so when that happened, it was really the top administration and the faculty, but really the top administration that came down on me like a ton of bricks. And I was told by my attorneys, I actually ended up suing NYU, and they said that these people have a visceral hatred for you. And they said, we don't see that very often, like where they actually hate the claimant, and so what I thought was there's something more to this wokeness than meets the eye. And I started to think, I really hit a third rail here. And I noticed right away that this is an elite ideology, and it's coming from the top. It's not a bunch of blue-haired kids on campus that are leading this. This came from the top. And so I wanted to get to the root of it. So I started this journey to get to the root of it. The next book after Springtime for Snowflakes was Google Archipelago, which you mentioned. And that I was trying to track down, like, what is going on with this big tech, and, why are they promoting, leftism, and why are they, discriminating against non-leftists, really? Why are they ranking and disappearing people? So I started to explore that in that book, and came up with the idea of the digital gulag, and tracked and traced that. And, it just kept leading further up the chain. Okay. So I wasn't satisfied with the idea that, I think big tech is a leading edge of all this. But I wasn't satisfied that I'd identified the actual players. And
I think you made a good comparison between what they do at Google in the modern day, and how they kind of just isolate everybody. They don't have to destroy you. They just have to move you off so you can't have regular access, and so people can't hear your positions, right?
Right.
I read Solzhenitsyn's 3-volume Gulag Archipelago, and to stack this high, and I went through, and this is a horrific story. I was encouraged by volume 3 and how they turn it around, and how they discover how the organs of state, the organs of state had control of them through the stool pigeons. And in order to get out of that situation, historically, they had to kill the stool pigeons. These days, these are our stool pigeons, right? These are the things we have around us.
Yes.
This informs the organs of the state.
Right.
So for you to make that brilliant leap and to metaphorize it and get it in front of people, that's where you really came onto my radar, because I was like, oh, this guy's not joking around. He's he's like tugging on the lion's tail. I wonder if he knows what's on the other end. Yeah.
I was starting to find out what was on the other end. And that's what I tried to explore in this last book, The Great Reset and Struggle for Liberty, Unraveling the Global Agenda. It's just, who are these players at the top, as high as we can find anyway. And that led me to these roundtable groups, and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, or Chatham House, and the CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, and of course the Bilderberg Group, and then the Club of Rome, and then of course the WEF and the Trilateral Commission. And I noticed this incestuous relationship between, and the UN is also part of this. These incestuous relationships between these people in these organizations. This is the world's ruling body, and they are tied to the hip to each other ideologically, and all of this wokeness stuff really flows from there. I believe it flows from these people. Why? Because I think, and I've said in the book, that wokeness serves a function. It's not just a particular, harassing ideological misfortune for us. It serves a function for this elite, and that is, I think, is the idea that it's meant to habituate people into this idea that they're unworthy and they are everything they have is a function of privilege, and likewise can and should be revoked. And I think this ideology came from the top, and it serves a function. And you look at the UN and their population conferences and their numerous documents and proclamations. They've been saying for over 75 years, let's say, that that the Western world or the developed world is these people are over reproducing and over consuming, and they have to be their consumption and their reproduction. This has to be curtailed dramatically. And of course, the Club of Rome, their neo-Malthusian rhetoric was off the charts with, limits to growth and beyond the limits and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, and I just saw all this in this big cluster, and that's what I wanted to pull apart.
Well, I brought you an artifact because as you were talking, I thought, well, you're talking about the round table groups, right?
Right. There it is.
So I have across the top of the shelf there, I got their volumes because I was incredulous. I didn't think they existed. And
Right.
I said, so I went out and started becoming an expert in rare books and these sort of things and how to find. And when you get into it, this is their whole plan as they're going up to World War One. You can read into it, and then it takes form in the Royal Institute of International Affairs, as you said, and Council on Foreign Relations. A council is a Soviet. It was their international communist project, but they don't want to call it the Soviet for foreign relations. That's too straight up. And they can't call it the Royal Institute. Let's call it the Council, right? And from that, they started to change statecraft really easily to keep us in a wartime economy, get us into World War II. But alongside that, these robber barons also created the communist threat out there and supported Lenin and
totally
Stalin,
bankrolled them and supported them, and this is really what people. This was the thing that having been a Marxist, this was the part that really blew my mind. When I first started into this area, and of course my entree into it was, of course, it was Anthony C. Sutton and his work, and I said, boy, this blows the top off of every communist viewpoint and where they think they're going and who they think is really driving this this idea that it's this working class movement. It is so far from the truth. So that was really quite an liberating discovery.
Yeah, before I got to Sutton, I found out about Carol Quigley and Tragedy and Hope, and that's where I was really incredulous because I said I was as a career, I was very successful at that age. I had a 5-year college education because it took me 5 years to get through, and I was so like this.
Yeah, Normark. They get into that a little bit here in a second. But yeah, it's these guys like the Rothschilds being one of the main players that helped to fund a lot of this stuff and a lot of this agenda. Their family being involved, like the Swiss. There's a Swiss Rothschild that I think was important in the creation of Israel. Them and the connection to the British king of the time. They do get into that, but basically, the gist is that everyone gets played, and it's all part of this agenda to move towards their ultimate goal, which is some type of Well, these guys are going to get into it, but it's more control, basically. You know, it's all about control and domination over humanity.
This could not be going on my watch and me not know about it. And then I found that book and I was like, wow. And then I was incredulous about that. And that's when I found Sutton and then Gatto. And then you start to find all these, because the way they do it is they want their narrative to be like a sphere, a ball. Right. And anything outside their official narrative is conspiracy theory.
Right.
So there are many things that are real and exist and they're hidden just out there and they call them conspiracy theory. And why do they hide them out there? Because if you knew this, you'd figure out this whole thing is not the whole thing. Right. So they want people to be afraid to go out there. They want you to be afraid to go out there because you'll never work in your industry again. Well, how will you pay your bills? Right. That's the fear they use to keep people incapacitated.
And they also use, ridicule, and they got all these minions out there. Anytime you mention these groups and these and their agenda, you're dismissed. And they have the whole academic field completely under their thumb. And you can't, as an academic, explore any of this stuff. You'll be just totally dismissed. I have a friend, John Kleisik, John Kleisik. I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a book called School World Order, and he wanted to go into a PhD program, and he told him what he was going to write about, which was a lot of this material, and they wouldn't have it. They won't even look at it.
Did he write it anyway and get it out?
Yes, it's called School World Order. Very good book.
All right. I've got that because I want that. I need that. See, I hear about things like that. I'm like, I need that in my library because I think the most credible way that people can get out of their bubble is through books.
Oh, absolutely.
And when I started looking into these things 20 years ago, I didn't believe what I saw on the internet. I couldn't believe. I was like, I don't know. What's the reference? So I was saying to myself, I need to go get the first edition copies of these books. I need Woodrow Wilson in his own words, and it's 8 pages. And that's why when they paraphrase, it's always, this is a specious quote. It doesn't exist. That's because it's an 8-page quote. And so people paraphrase and they take different parts.
That happens a lot. And that's a problem.
So it's even more real.
To track things to their sources.
Yes, it's super important. So it's even more real what he's saying because it's 8 pages and you have the book, right? So to get into these types of things and then pass them around to each other is easier today than ever because of all the social media. So at the same time, they've presented us with this big problem that seems overwhelming, and there's this really well-orchestrated people, and they're well-funded and hidden. And even if you find evidence and tell people, people have cognitive dissonance, and they can't, put it together. They got the double think going on.
Right.
So it's a really interesting academic problem that we have to solve here. And I think the first is like just from your origin story, finding these things. Why did you find Anthony Sutton credible? What was his pedigree that would let you think that was respectable research?
It wasn't his pedigree that impressed me, although he had an impressive pedigree. It wasn't his Hoover Scholar Institute association or his his PhD, and it was what he was saying and the sourcing that he used to validate it all, and the kind of connections that he made. He was making connections that weren't allowed to be made. And those kind of leaps excite me a lot. And that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find out what the hell's going on and who's behind all of these things, and his explanation for why these, top capitalists and bankers would foster and fund socialism. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. They're monopolists. So they are trying to create monopoly structures for their own benefit. And so it's a monopoly scheme.
And it works from a multiple of angles, because when the robber barons create socialism and communism on the internal of a country, let's say Russia or China, it's a major wealth reappropriation scam. They don't have to pay as Western powers for mining rights. They just go there from the top and they do it without the knowledge of the people. Right. So the leadership's always corrupt. The leadership is always capitalism magnetized, and then they use socialism, communism as the population management
for the
structure.
Ground. Right.
But also, here's the hidden angle. And this makes a lot of sense when people consider it.
Yeah.
They usually just look at what goes on in the country. Look at what it does for our military justification as the Anglo-American establishment. Oh, that country's turning communist. We must go do a coup. CIA, MI6 overthrowing all these countries. Why? Because communism, which was created. So it was created as a way to militarize the world. And then the schooling, the education was transmuted into a schooling system to facilitate that militarization. And this one world, global.
That was like a really interesting key that he talked about there is like, okay, these guys understand like, this communism, socialism system is a great way to, concentrate the wealth and power and also subjugate, the population of a certain area. And then, having that as a control system, you can also create an enemy for creating this excuse to go and into military conflicts all over the planet. So that was a really interesting thing that they revealed there.
Internationalist state,
it's the Hegelian dialectic that they're using. They posit the thesis, then they posit the antithesis, and really what they want out of it is the third term, which is the synthesis. That's what they're looking for. So,
well, because if you look at it as like thesis is the truth and the antithesis is not the truth, the synthesis has the truth with some not truth in there, and that's what they use the rule. And if you got back to truth, you would not be in that cage, as it were.
But like for example, I'm sure you've come across this too. Mao was very heavily supported, of course, and he was really foisted into power with a great deal of help by Yale University and Yale in China, of course. They gave him his start, and they gave him space to. First of all, they gave him the editorship of their magazine. He took over their magazine. Then they gave him space for bookstores. He ran a chain of bookstores. He was a bookstore dealer. I mean, he was a book dealer, effectively running a chain operation, and selling communist books. And this funded the Communist Party. I'm not saying it was the sole source of their funding, but it was definitely a source of their funding.
Yes. And a lot of people don't know about the Yale connections to Mao. My buddy Jay Dyer had recently sent me. He's like, "Here's the news clipping." He's like,
"It's beautiful, isn't it?"
Right?
Yeah.
So Mao. Let me close the loop real quick on Sutton. I knew he was a serious author, not just by his work and not from his pedigree, because I knew that was kind of like you could have a pedigree without having quality work, but his work. And then I found him referenced as a footnote in Zbigniew Brzezinski's Between Two Ages. And I was like, Brzezinski reads Sutton. He says, for this information, you go read Sutton. I was like, okay, this is the official
that's
stuff.
Pretty serious. Yeah.
The East India Company wrecked up China. The Rockefellers, at the end of the 1800s, they come in and they start to, as the robber barons finished up in America and Europe, they moved to what became the Soviet Union and China. And they set up all the infrastructure so they could have communists later there, a couple decades later. So in the 1920s, the Rockefeller medical establishment goes in and redefines everything that's medicine in China.
Right.
They set up all the corporate infrastructure. And I know this because Raymond Fosdick, the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, wrote a book called The History of the Rockefeller Foundation. And he tells you all about it.
They set up the China, what's it called? The China Medical Board or something like that.
The China Medical Board, yes. And then there was another company called the American International Corporation, not AIG, it was the AIC. And it was all these Federal Reserve Board members and robber barons. And it was them getting industrialized into Russia and China to set up for Mao's revolution, which Dave Rockefeller said was his proudest project. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, one of his proud projects was Pol Pot in Cambodia.
Yeah.
And then you start to see, it's top down. And Rockefeller, he admits it in his memoirs.
Yes, he does.
Stand accused, and I'm a proud internationalist. So I think that you picking up, first off, the transition from Marxism to libertarianism is remarkable. And if only we could have more people do that, right?
Yeah.
Like to follow those steps. Is there a prescription we can provide for that case? Because we know you can get better. You're doing wonderful, right? right? But then to also pick up on this meta overarching Anglo-American establishment, type of milieu, and then connect it back to all these other things that you've been professing on for years. Because even though you were a Marxist and a professor, you weren't like a professor of Marxism. You taught like 1900s scientific development, technology, philosophy, these sort of things.
That's right. That's what I was. I studied 19th century British science.
On that topic, because you've got Malthus and Darwin and Herbert Spencer and all these characters that bring about eugenics, and that plays into the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum, Club of Rome. So you had all that.
It does. Yes, it does. Feeds right in.
But I did not know about Holyoake, George Holyoake, and the British secularism. And I was wondering, like, how does that interweave with Fabian socialism? Was there an overlap? Did you compare those?
Well,
diagrams?
I mean, so Holyoake was an Owenite.
Robert Owen?
Robert Owen, of course. Robert Owen, who was one of the very first socialists in
utopian socialists.
He was a utopian, as Marx would call him.
Right, yeah.
And disparage him for that. But yeah, they set on these home colonies and trying to develop socialist enclaves within the country. And, they weren't trying to overthrow the state. They just thought that they could create socialism in micro bodies of socialism. And so Holyoake was he was a Owenite socialist missionary, as they call him, social missionary for Owen, for Robert Owen's Owenism. And then he was an atheist. He became an atheist. He was reputedly the last guy to be arrested for blasphemy in Great Britain. And then he started this movement called secularism. And he named it's a neologism for him. He actually created the word secularism. It did not exist prior to his usage. And that was 1852 in the periodical called The Reasoner. And they established this secularist movement. Now, he was really kind of trying to rehabilitate the radical atheist free thought movement and make it more respectable. So he got more upper middle class people involved in secularism. And he reached out to Huxley, to Spencer, and got them enrolled in this secular movement.
Now, Huxley was T.H. Huxley, Thomas H. Huxley.
Right.
I've got many of his books. So he was the progenitor of agnosticism, that he didn't have enough.
That's right. Agnosticism. Actually, I would say that Holyoake, and I have said in my research, in my writing, Holyoake's secularism was really the precursor of agnosticism. And what happened there is basically they stole his idea from him. Huxley did. And because you could do that when Holyoake was a working class guy.
Yeah.
And you could just steal their ideas and run with it. And that's basically where agnosticism comes from. It comes from
so Darwin's bulldog stole his homework from somebody else.
Yeah, basically, because it was very much in the air in the 1850s, 1853, 4, and 5, in the circles that Huxley was running in, and along with Holyoake. And so secularism was like a watchword in this milieu, and Holyoake really started it. And what he said about secularism, it was unknowingness without denial. So that's exactly what agnosticism is. We don't know, but we don't have to deny it. And that was the prescription for scientific naturalism, which took over science at that point. That was the epistemological framework that overtook science at that point and became a shibboleth. If you weren't a scientific naturalist, you were getting excluded from the realms of science.
Now, a shibboleth is a biblical term, which is something that you disclose to let someone know that you can see the same perspective. You're in, right?
Yeah.
It's like an exchange, almost like a password, right?
That's
Okay,
right.
so I wanted to clear that up for the audience. And then my next question is, Anthony Sutton had a co-author in 1976. They wrote Trilaterals over Washington.
Patrick Wood.
Do you know Patrick?
Yes, I do.
All right, because I was going to say you're
We've
so
spoken
close
a couple times together.
All right, so I was going to say his Technocracy Rising book, which is not his recent book, but that's where he really goes over Saint-Simon and Decamp and all these other people who had the scientific humanist kind of angle developing into
Auguste Comte, yeah,
right, and into the 1930s technocracy movement, right?
Yeah.
And I've been a fan of his work for years. I got to interview him like probably 10 years ago for like a 3-hour film setup that we went to Arizona for. And he has stayed, like, it wasn't easy. I went back and did all the work on his earliest interviews and like the radio interviews he did with Sutton and these guys back in the early 80s and late 70s. And he's intrepid. He's intrepid, and he's definitely someone who knew how to walk his own path and not be disturbed by the naysayers and the haters. And Sutton too. The guy who fired Sutton was David Packard, who later I think fired Steve Jobs. So there's, if you get too close to the truth, they gotta let you go. Gotta let you go.
Yeah, they just
trilaterals.
Sutton died, mysteriously, I think, but
he died, I think 2001, didn't he?
It was around there, and
he had just published the Skull and Bones book. That was the last book.
And he says that his most important work.
Well, it's a combination because his Skull and Bones work comes from Charlotte Iserbyt, who wrote the Deliberate.
I know about her very well. That's
okay.
So
She
John
just passed away,
Kleisik,
too.
who I mentioned before with School World Order, he has Iserbyt's papers, including Sutton's. He has all of his Iserbyt's papers. Charlotte's.
Including Sutton's, you're saying?
Including Sutton's.
All right, now you got me, because I've got Gatto's. And if we put these things together, we have a whole 20th century, what people knew, 50 years ago about some of these topics. And it makes a much stronger case for people today to see that Klaus didn't come out of nowhere.
I'm the biggest promoter of John Kleisik. You got to have him on sometime.
All right, good. Well, you already sold me on his book, and I'm going to have him on. If he's around and doing interviews, we're getting him on.
Yeah, he's around.
Because,
I can talk to him for you, and so you don't have to bother with it.
Yeah, for sure. I would appreciate that. So getting all this information together, whether it's how they took over the education system and transmuted it to change our attitudes, values, behaviors, beliefs, or Sutton, how the secret societies kind of helped to precipitate this whole sort of thing, because Yale is the East India Company College and Skull and Bones is the German secret society in that, and the German royalty are the British royalty. So it's like there's not a whole lot, like once you get to those layers of power, you're pretty close to the operations. And then there's families above that give the king and queen their power. Like there's the whole inversion of the pyramid. We see like our president at the top, but that's the bottom of the other pyramid.
Exactly.
Of power.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Are there times when you felt like this information is too hot and heavy and you were going to get burned out, or trials and tribulations, dark nights of the soul, all that good stuff?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's times when you're so excited and you've made a discovery and you're making these connections. Then there's other times when it feels like you're chiseling in granite, and it's very difficult sometimes. And then, of course, then you start to have doubts. Maybe there's no there with this stuff. But I've come to also just basically think that my work was in Darwinism, in effect. The Holyoke camp, the secularism camp, what I argued, and I've published on this, was the precursor to scientific naturalism, which was the epistemological framework that Darwin operated under, and that's how they promoted him, through the scientific naturalism framework. And what was I going with that?
Scientific naturalism of Darwin and his the Darwin Wedgwood family.
And where I was going with that is that, this has been, there's a reason why the elite wanted Darwinism. Let's put it that way.
Well, it matches up with Malthus. If you look at Darwin and his influences, right? You've got Galton and Malthus. And Malthus is back at the early 1800s, 1830s. And his whole
18th century. His book Essay on Populations published I think 1798.
thank you for the more accuracy in this podcast, because that's what we're all about. Malthus was the East India Company cat, right? So he's solving problems for the employer. That's the gist. Adam Smith also solving problems for the employer. Agriculture is opium. They have an opium monopoly on the world.
Right.
They might still have that type of monopoly, but they've cloaked it in ever so many layers of Kissinger associates and other things like that.
Right.
And they've used corporate personhood against real human beings. And if we were to change a couple words in the corporate rules of engagement, all these companies would lose their power in the World Economic Forum, and they could no longer take these actions. So we need some like Skadden Arps type attorney to come up with some legalese, and let's, figure out how to play their game, like how to make their game obsolete, because their game sucks. And we're not going to battle that game because they have the ability to print money out of thin air. They have militaries, they have tech weapons that we don't have, right? So what do we have to do? We have to understand what they're doing, see where they're going, go occupy that position, use the intellectual, moral, and ethical high ground to maintain that position. They can't come up to our altitude. They need us to go down to them. They need us to be violent, frustrated, aggressive, all these things. They can give pills or cages for that. They got the whole society set up on
covered.
that. Yeah. So how do you remain optimistic so you can stay focused on problem solving and tracking these guys down?
Well, I just, for me, it's just finding the next discovery. It's I take it as I try to stay motivated intrinsically by the material itself, and then I just let the chips fall where they may in terms of what effect it has. I can't worry about that. I think I live by the axiom, do everything you can and do your best and leave the rest to God, and that's what I do. So I can't say that I have any pretensions about bringing these people down in some sense. But I do think, and I say this in my book, is that we can cut the puppet strings from ourselves. That's the key, I think. So that's the metaphor I like to use.
Cut the puppet strings, educate ourselves, find the others, create parallel methods, societies,
parallel economies, parallel networks,
decentralization,
knowledge. Parallel currency, of course, is absolutely essential. Once the CBDC is put in place, we got to have a parallel currency already ready and usable and already being used before the CBDC gets lowered on us, because then you'll have no outside of the system at that point if you have no parallel currency in play.
And it's a hard guess, because is it going to be gold and silver? Crypto, gold backs? Is it going to be mountain hours where local places just make up their own currency and exchange it amongst themselves? Because that's a thing that's happened.
I think it could be multiple, actually.
Or prepping, where whatever they're using, you'll trade for.
Right. It's. I think there's no reason to circumscribe it or to limit it. I was on a podcast yesterday where it's a Bitcoin podcast, and for them, Bitcoin is it. But I mean, I wouldn't rule out gold. I wouldn't rule out other currencies. I don't know about other cryptos. They kind of convinced me that Bitcoin's really the only crypto worthwhile, but I don't know. I still think that it depends on what your network will accept, really, when it comes down to it.
And I'll leave this video on that note. If you'd like to watch the full video, I will. The link is both in the video description on the YouTube video, and then I dropped it in the chat room there for you guys. But yeah, thank you guys for coming to hang out with me tonight. And like I said, we'll be back next week for another episode here, and probably have some updates. I didn't get to tell you guys, but I ran into an incident with the police this last week on a traffic ticket, and I've got a couple of them thrown out already, but I'll talk a little bit about that, I guess, next week. Probably should have covered some of that tonight, but anyway, I got a couple of those thrown out because they were just like items that were. It was a tail light, and they said I had an improper muffler. But anyway, I was able to go to another officer in the town and then have them, because they have some kind of things on those tickets where you can get them fixed within a certain amount of time, and then get an officer to inspect, and they can throw it out basically, which is just like, what is it even for then? So it's it's kind of a harassment. But anyway, Norma, Ken Rondon, and Crimson Clad, thanks for hanging out in the chat. And then also our viewer there on the old Theta TV that popped in there for a little bit, 89 Pintail. So thank you guys for coming and hanging out. We'll catch you guys next week for another episode. Peace.